Hello, friends. If we haven't met yet, my name is Missy Hansen. Jake and I have a lot of children, and they're all packed together, all four at one time, or run one right after another. So originally, Jake and I thought we would just keep having kids until God put the kibosh on it, but that quickly changed as we ran out of room in our minivan, and this mama ran out of energy. So as friends saw me struggling with my motley crew, they would try to encourage me by reminding me that how this season will pass so quickly and cherish every moment. You'll blink and they'll be gone. But that encouragement only goes so far when you feel like you're drowning. I knew that God had given me these blessings of children, but my daily life felt more like a battlefield than full contentment. And what I'm going to share with you today is rather raw on my heart, as those sentiments have too quickly come true. And I am in a season of releasing my children. I will be sharing a hindsight perspective with you that I hope will bring contentment and courage to you as you do the hard work of shaping arrows. Psalms 127, 3-5 says that children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring are a reward from Him. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. He will not be put to shame when he confronts his accusers at the city gate. When we are in the thick of parenting, it can be difficult to remember why behind our efforts. Perhaps fully contented parenting requires a perspective shift. Rather than trying to raise perfectly behaved children, perhaps we should let go of perfect and ideal and focus on how God sees our kids, like arrows. Despite their rough edges and prickly personalities, our children will advance God's kingdom beyond our reach. Their testimony will silence the accusing enemy, and their lives will speak of God's victory and bring glory to our King. To this end, God gives us arrows to sharpen, to carry, to practice aiming, and eventually to release. Listen closely, dear mama. In the battlefield that is your life, remember our purpose. Remember your purpose. Remember their purpose. It's essential that we not lose sight of God's eternal perspective. We are surrounded by infinite distractions daily, trying to draw our attention away from Christ. For many years, I thought that the goal was to raise obedient, moral, emotionally healthy children who would succeed at the American dream. I worked really hard to raise good kids who were manageable, who were marriageable, and employable. But for what purpose? Was it for my own personal need for harmony? Was it so that they would reflect well on their parents? Was it so that they would be self-sufficient or even support us in our old age? Somewhere along the line, we had to stop and ask these uncomfortable questions and be honest about why we were fighting this uphill battle for our kids' growth and discipline. Yes, we want God-honoring, moral, confident children, but this is not the goal. Connecting them with Christ and watching Him lead them in His purpose is the target of all of our effort. Think about how purposeful an archer, how purposefully he takes time to shape, sharpen, and aim each arrow. But it's not for the arrow's sake. The warrior does not put that effort into an arrow so that he can shelter that arrow in his quiver or put that arrow on display. The warrior's thoughts are focused on the day of battle, when that arrow will save a life, win a battle, and bring victory. At the right time, the warrior will release the arrow to bring glory to the king. And as we look at our children as arrows, think about where you are in this process with your own arrows. Are you carrying them? Are you shaping them? Are you sharpening them? Are you aiming them? And what does it look like to aim our arrows towards Christ? Every stage of this process has its challenges, and I think we would do a better job with all of these stages if we would understand our aim, if we start with the end in mind. In the end, our goal is to launch our arrows on Christ's trajectory. The job of an arrow is very specific: to fly away, far, and true. And with that in mind, let's think for a moment about how we are shaping the arrows that we are given. See, God has not commissioned us to whittle our kids into walking crutches. A crutch stays close. A crutch is manageable, never out of control. We hold tightly to a walking crutch. A crutch is designed to bring stability and comfort as you age. Those who whittle crutches have their focus inward. They work for the good of the crutch and themselves. Self-support and self-comfort is the goal. But that's not heaven's perspective. We are not raising crutches. We are raising arrows. An arrow is much less predictable. We hold an arrow loosely. It flies far, often into perilous situations. The goal was never to keep our arrow with us, safe and secure, close and comfortable, far from the battle. Each step of the parenting journey is to prepare our kids for battle. Our goal is to launch our children on Christ's trajectory, wherever He leads. So here's what raising arrows looks like. Number 1, aim. Intentionally focusing our children on Jesus. And number 2, tension. Holding solidly to truth and boundaries no matter how hard they resist. And thirdly, launch, releasing each child to his unique calling. And we've already talked about the aim of parenting, so let's take a moment to talk about the tension. Let's just acknowledge what an uncomfortable process this is. Every time we pull that bowstring, there is tension. How many of you know the tension that I'm talking about? I am not a confrontational person. I would prefer to pull on that I would prefer not to pull on that bowstring quite so hard. I would prefer to keep the arrow close and comfortable and keep carrying them around on my back. I don't want my kids to suffer. I want to rescue them from every misery. I'd love to absorb every consequence of their foolish choices and delete the cruel comments of their peers, and soften every harsh circumstance. I want my kids to like me, and I want to say yes to their every request. But where there's no tension, there will be no successful launch. Sometimes conflict is exactly where we need to be. Sometimes tension or disappointment or heartache or discomfort is exactly the thing that will make our children stronger, sharper, and more effective. I love the verse that says, God Himself strengthens my arm to bend a bow of bronze. Bronze bows are heavy. They are much harder to control than wooden bows, but they are powerful weapons. Some of you may have a child who needs a bronze bow. I had one of those. He always needed a little extra incentives to stay on course. He always needed more tension and a little more attention. But in the end, his impact for God's kingdom was worth the struggle. He was the one who always pushed the boundaries, always questioned, chose to rebel, and had to learn the hard way. But when he repented in God's perfect timing, his testimony was more potent because of God's generous grace to him. He is more vocal and more determined to stand unwavering for Christ. This child joined the U.S. Marines for the purpose of being a light in a dark place. He knows that God has chosen him for the task, and even though most days he had to stand alone for righteousness, he has been equipped through the tension of his teens. And I want to encourage any of you who feel like God has given you a bronze bow. Perhaps you have a specific child that creates more tension and needs extra attention. Perhaps you feel like you're doing something wrong. Maybe you feel like everybody else's kids are falling in line, responding to gentle nudges, and your child just keeps pulling away farther and farther. I'd like to encourage you that God sees you. He has a purpose for that arrow. Continue to embrace the tension. Continue to trust his perfect timing and way. This child was created on purpose, with purpose, for a purpose. God specifically chose you to be his or her mom. He intentionally chose that arrow for your quiver. He has a good plan, and he is equipping you to equip your child. Listen to Psalms 18:30 through 34. God's way is perfect. All the Lord's promises prove true. He is a shield for all who look to him for protection. God arms me with strength. Verse 33, he makes me as sure-footed as a deer, enabling me to stand on the mountain heights. He trains my hands for battle. He strengthens my arm to draw a bronze bow. God equips us where he calls us. God isn't focused on our comfort. He's focused on the battle plan. He knows exactly what training is necessary for victory in your family and in the lives of those your family will touch. God has a target for your arrow, somewhere beyond where you can see or understand. That pain has a purpose, and the life of your child will bring glory to God. Be encouraged. Be content in the tension. And in the midst of our tension, let's pause and ask ourselves, 1, do I trust that God is equipping me to aim this arrow? 2, will I surrender to the tension as I train this child and continually aim them towards Christ? 3, will I release my child into his care? Now, step 3 can feel like the hardest. This is the process of letting go. I told you that this is personal for me right now. This past summer, I launched 3 of my 4 children from our nest. And then over Christmas, I had to do it all over again. My oldest married his high school sweetheart, and they have moved to Alabama. My second son joined the U.S. Marines, and I shipped him off to boot camp in June. And then a week later, my daughter moved out on her own as well. Each of these kids is joyfully living their dreams, and each one is pursuing Christ wholeheartedly. And that's what I had to keep reminding myself as I mourned the loss of their presence in our home. Thank the Lord, I still have one in high school, and he gets extra hugs every day. Friends, I still live in the tension. I'm still releasing. I'm still praying like crazy for all 4 of them. And like you guys, I have emotionally hard days. But Jesus can handle all of our feelings, can't he? As we release our kids, we can hold both joy and sorrow, gratitude and grief. But the main thing is that we hold loosely to our kids. and tightly to Jesus. Now, most of you won't be releasing your kids into adulthood for many more years, but as you go through seasons of motherhood, you will practice releasing your children again and again. You will release them into scary and uncomfortable situations. You will release frustration, hurt, and bitterness. You will release control, manipulation, and the urge to rescue your kids from hard things. You will release your idyllic dreams and perfect children, the perfect spouse, and the perfect circumstances. You might have to let go of that clean house, that star athlete, or the studious academic, and maybe even comfortable harmony for a higher aim. But as you aim, draw, and release, you can live fully content, trusting that they are becoming exactly who they are supposed to be. And so are you. And I'm going to close with the words of an old hymn called Giveth. As I read, let this be our prayer as we simply receive what we need from God. He giveth more grace as our burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength as our labors increase. To added afflictions, he addeth his mercy. To multiplied trials, he multiplies peace. When we have exhausted our store of resources, when we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, the Father's full giving has only begun. Fear not that thy need shall exceed his provision. Our God ever yearns his resources to share. Lean hard on the arm everlasting, availing. The Father both thee and thy load will unbear. His love has no limits, his grace has no measure, his power no boundary known unto men. For out of his infinite riches in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again.